Hello everyone. Welcome to my first actual Houdini tutorial. I just wanted this to have a test to test my recording setup and get you guys introduced to Houdini a little bit. So if you have installed Houdini, basically this is the first thing that you see, but if you ever wanted to install Houdini, what you go is you go to sideeffects.com. Oh, let's not look at my bank account. Sideeffects.com. And basically you can even get a free version. So you can go download Houdini, and you can download whatever you want. So you can download the latest daily build, which they release literally every day, or the latest production build, and you basically say, okay, I want to download Houdini, and there you go. It downloads it for you. Now the best thing is this, it is completely free. So if you want to download Houdini and you want to install it and you want to play around with it, it is completely free. You just need to register, and if you want to render at full HD resolution or higher even, you just have to pay $99 a year to use it. But you can do anything you want. Now that even includes doing things that are really complicated and really hard generally in most other packages. For example, having a torus and doing a giant explosion on it. So literally, this is the free version of Houdini, and I can do very complicated effects like actual explosion simulation, and you can see how beautiful this works. But we're not really going to go into here just yet. I just wanted to give you like a small short overview of what Houdini really is, because you might be familiar with other packages, 3D packages, and they work a little differently. So let's take a look at what everything is. Now this here is the viewport. This is pretty obvious. This is what you've grown accustomed to in other packages maybe. Here we have a few shelf tools. You might be familiar with those as well. So these can be doing things like placing a box or going into polygon modeling, and I can go poly extrude and hit that and do some simple poly modeling here. Again, not super complicated, but it's something we can do. Now, this brings actually up something much more interesting. You can see I have this tree, which is sort of like a history, but they don't necessarily need to all be in line, and I'm going to show you what that means in just a second. But basically, you have this sort of dynamic history, but I can change the input to that history and do cool stuff with it. So, and then we have, on top of that, we have essentially our parameters. So for the poly extrude, I can do a local extrude, a global extrude. So this is basically like local coordinates or world coordinates, and we have some additional options. We can create groups on these things. So there are some interesting things that we can do. So let's do something very simple. Like let's make a reusable tool that you can use time and time again, and that is actually kind of fun to build. So I'm just going to make a new scene. Just discard a new. So this is exactly like you would have it as well. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a curve. Now there's many ways I can draw a curve. I can go to the Create tab and click Curve, and you can see I can make a curve here, and I can tell it to be what type I want it to be. Bezier, polygon, NURBS. We can also do it in another way, which is, for example, we can actually type geometry right here, dive into the geometry. Now this is something of a little bit of a weird concept, but if you double click a node, you dive inside of it. Now standard, this geo node comes with a file. Now we're just going to delete that. Now actually I should probably tell you how to get out of this node as well. So if I do tab and I type geo, it's going to auto-complete it, and I hit enter to place geometry. I then double click to go inside, or press U to go out. If you like clicking buttons, you can also click on this navigation thing here, which also shows you where you are. So let's call this thing basic road, so people know what we're doing. I'm just going to delete this file here, and I'm going to start typing curve, and again we get curve, which is kind of cool. So let's build that. So this is going to be our beautiful road, and I'm just going to switch this over to NURBS, and you can see some of these things are sort of duplicated across. which can be useful. We can control the degree, so let's probably just keep that normally at 4. And what we're going to do next is we're going to place a sweep node. A sweep node is kind of a cool node, and you can see it has 3 inputs. And if I middle mouse this, it says cross-section, backbone, and reference points. Now if you want to know more about this, you can always click the help, which is actually very useful. And basically you can see what it does. It takes something and it like an input shape and it puts it across our curve. So let's give that a go. Let's make a cross section. So I'm just going to do a circle. Let's do it very simple at first. And you can see our circle has been placed here, which is kind of cool. However, roads tend to not be very tubular, although it could be a pipe as well. It doesn't really matter. But let's just do a line instead. Again, this could be a curve, this could be a line, this could be any shape you can imagine. Now, we see this line is vertical, and we don't really want it to be vertical. So what we're going to do is we're going to change the direction from being in X, Y, Z upwards. We want it to be flat. So I'm just going to change this to 1 and 0. That looks pretty good. However, it seems to be on one side only. So what we want to do is we want to have the distance, which is, for example, let's set that to be 2 units. We want the origin of this object to be not moving away from the center. We want it to be centered. So we know that the distance is 2, so I can do -1. And this works, right? Our system now has these lines on here. And this is beautiful. But we don't really have a surface yet. So I'm just going to skin our input, and look at that. We get a surface. Let's say I want to make my surface a little bit wider. So I'm just going to make this be 4. And suddenly it's not really centered nicely anymore. Like we can see it's not centered, and that's because I haven't centered this. I just typed in a static value. Now this is where the power of Houdini really comes in, because you can link anything to anything. So what we're going to do is I'm going to copy this parameter. So I'm going to right-click, copy parameter. I'm going to say paste relative references. And immediately we see that this has actually moved it farther away, which is not what we want. We want it to move closer. So I'm going to do minus in front of it. So we're negating it. Now it's on the line, but it's not exactly where we want. So we actually want to, because let's sort of figure out in our head where we want it to go. Our distance is 4. So we want to move it half that distance in the minus direction. So I'm going to multiply this times a half. You can also divide times 2, whichever you prefer. I like multiplying more. So in this case, I've moved it to the back, and suddenly I can change this number to be whatever I want it to be. So if I set it to 10, it still works. If I set it to 1, it still works. And our system is just really solid right now. So this is looking pretty cool, but our curve is really smooth and nice, and our representation here is very, our result is very choppy. So I'm going to add a node called the resample. And the resample node adds additional points. Now we can see here that the resample is making maybe a little bit too many points. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to be to a distance of 1. And suddenly we get this beautiful shape. That's actually really nice. Now what's interesting about this is that not so much that we can do one curve, but if we're a little bit smarter, we can do multiple. So if I create a merge node at the top here, so right below the curve, I can actually create a second curve. And I can plug that in. And I can start drawing that road. I'm just going to switch that over to NURBS again. And suddenly we can have multiple roads getting created here. Now it gets even more fun when we actually not just have multiple inputs, because this is getting to be, eventually this would get a little bit chaotic, right, if I just keep adding nodes. So this is one other thing that we can do, and this is basically the end of this short introduction, is actually collapsing nodes together. So if I do Shift-C, this has made a subnet. Now let's call this one road tool. Let's make our merge be at the top here, because that's a little bit confusing. 1 second. Sorry about that, guys. So basically we have our roads coming in right here, and then we have our road tool right here. But we can't really control anything right now. We can just add additional curves to that merge. Oh, not a curve sect. I wanted to make a curve. Yeah, let's do road from here, for example. Add that in there. Switch that over to NURBS. There we go. So we can add as many of these things as we want, which is really nice. But we don't really have any control over how wide the road is or how far these sections are spaced apart. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click this little button here called Edit Parameter Interface, and it brings up this menu, and I can add these controls. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take this control here, and I'm just going to drag it onto here. And the same I'm going to do for the line distance. I'm just going to call this what shall we call this? Resample length is actually not that bad of a name. It's fairly descriptive. And this called road width. Should probably type that correctly. Alright, so we hit apply, and suddenly we can control this from the outside, which is looking really nice. As you can see, I can make it very dense or very light. And we can control our road width as well. Now, let's say we find there's a lot of polygons here that we don't really need because there's really not that much going on. There's a node for that called the refine, and what we're going to do is we're going to say unrefine. So from refine, we're going to unrefine, and we're going to go from over the entire length of the curve, so that's U0 to U1. We're going to have a certain tolerance. Now I'm just going to lower the resample length so we can see this more clearly. But you can see what it's doing. It's automatically removing these points on the inside here that we don't really need. So this is what we had before, and after the refine we get this, which is a much cleaner representation. We only have the points where the geometry is actually curved. And that gives us a better result in the end. I'm just gonna select the sweep again before I go out, and there we go. We suddenly have this really nice tool that automatically controls our level of detail, and we can move this around in real time. It's really quick, really responsive, and we can make any changes. We can add as many curves as we want, and we never have to do anything like this work ever manually again. Again, we can add many more things. We can add UVs to this, we can add terrain integration, we can add the coming together of these roads, and we can make it much more complicated. But this is supposed to be like a very, very simple introduction, and I hope you understand what the power of this is and how you can use this for your own tools. So that is a really quick introduction to Houdini. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to post them in the forums or as a reply to the video. And this was Frey Cookstra, and yeah, let me know what else you guys want to learn. Goodbye.